Hi, guys. It's me, Jessica Hicks, here with another job related video. If you don't know about me, I am a corporate recruiter, and so I post different content all related to getting jobs, companies that are hiring, and just tips in general when it comes to interviewing. So I wanted to talk about behavior based interviews because these are things that I actually use on a daily basis as I'm assessing candidates. So, a lot of companies that are pretty large, like Google is a main company that comes to mind. They use behavioral based and situational based questions along with a host of other assessments. But when it comes to larger companies, they're going to use behavioral based interview questions. So, a sample question might be, tell me about a time where you worked collaboratively within a team. And the purpose of these questions is to really get an understanding of how you have acted in the past, because that will basically demonstrate your behaviors as a person coming into another organization and basically gives a glimpse of how you may behave in whatever the job is that you are interviewing for. So I have a couple of tips. I thought I would just come on to a live instead of recording, editing it, fighting with YouTube to post the video. I thought this might be a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with my 5 tips for preparing for a behavioral based interview. So, tip number one is to remember that when it comes to behavior based interviewing, the interviewer, as they're listening to you, will want to hear you tell a story. So you want to basically describe what your situation was, what actions you took, and whatever the outcome was, just like any other story. And you want to be able to provide some good details in there that will be relevant to the person you're talking with. So that's something to keep in mind as you're articulating your scenario and answering that question. You definitely want to do that. The next thing is that as you're telling the story, you still want to be clear and concise and make sure that you're keeping the examples pretty recent. So you're not wanting to talk about something that happened 10 years ago. And I literally have had candidates provide me examples about something that's happened so many years ago that they can't even really recall a lot of details, or they get lost themselves as they're telling this story. So you definitely want to make sure that your examples are recent and they're relevant to the job that you're applying to. So, me working in the human resources field, I wouldn't talk about years ago in college when I was working as a computer lab support for a role if I am applying to a recruiter job. So it just doesn't seem relevant, and you want to make sure if you're able to provide something recent and also very relevant to that interviewer to keep their interest, just like you would in a story. Like, you want to keep them interested, you want to make sure that it's relevant to them. Next, and I get this a lot because I talk with a lot of IT candidates, and it's basically to remember not to rush through your answer. So you don't want to speak incredibly fast to where the person doesn't understand, especially when it comes to when you're talking about technical components, which includes whether you're having the first assessment with someone in HR or a recruiter, even as you're talking with different team members, because technical people still have to talk to folks that are not technical. So we want to make sure that you can communicate and put things in the layman terms for our business users and our end users and the other stakeholders that you will be involved with. So this is particularly important if you realize that you do have an accent that may be difficult to understand. Just as I imagine anyone that's coming to the US, for example, um, they may need to learn English. And when you're first learning, if someone's talking really, really fast, you kind of lose them. So keep that in mind as well as you're talking to people. If you realize you have an accent, I welcome diversity and I really enjoy that, but I don't want a case where, you know, someone's basically messing it up for themselves because the other person just can't understand what they're saying. So just keep it at a medium pace. Don't talk too quickly to where the other person can't understand you. And hello, Primping Ain't Easy TV. Welcome. I am basically doing a live where I talk about a couple of tips for behavioral based interviews because this is something that I have a ton of experience with as a recruiter. So, welcome. Thanks for joining. So, I just went through a couple of tips. So, number one was to make sure that you're telling a story when it comes to behavioral based interviews. So, you want to actually talk through the situation, what happened, and then what was the outcome, and providing some good details in there that's relevant and to the point. You also want to make sure that you're being recent with your examples. You're not having something that's 10 years down the line that you can't even really remember and recall a lot of information about. Hey, Cubston. And then the next one is just making sure you're not speaking too fast. Like, make sure you're not rushing through your examples and you're actually talking at a medium pace to where the interviewer can understand you. So that was number three. My next tip for behavioral based interviews is to make sure that you are saying the word I. I talk to so many people, actually just finished up a call this morning where the person kept saying, we did this, we did that, my team did this. But what did you do? This is something that the interviewer is really going to be looking for, what you actually did, because as you're answering the question, we're making notes ourselves to figure out what actions you actually took in this example that you're providing. So that's something that I see a lot of people mess up, is just using the word we and not taking that opportunity to brag on themselves. Like, this is your chance to say, I did this and that, and this is why it was so great. This is literally your time to brag. So make sure you're talking about the things that you specifically did when you're providing your example. All right, so that was tip number four. Oh, and Cubston says that she's popping in and out because she's homeschooling. Oh my gosh, good luck. Cubston is great. If you haven't checked out our channel, please do. I've seen a lot of pretty cool recipes out there. So check out Cubston. Okay, so my last tip, actually, I won't say last because I think I have a bonus tip in here, but my fifth one is to make sure that when you're answering these behavioral based interview questions, you are keeping in mind and ready for follow up questions. I have people that provide these great examples and then they get through their example, whatever, and they're not ready for a follow up question. So, if just think about the fact that someone's going to kind of dig deeper, just like any other story. If you're talking about when I went to the store, well, then what happened? In any example that you're using, be ready for the interviewer to ask you additional questions. And this is why it's so important to use recent examples and relevant examples, because it's going to be a lot harder for you if you are sharing an example that happened 10 years ago versus something that maybe happened just a couple of weeks ago to a couple of months ago. So, hello, story time with Shay Johns. Welcome. And that was my fifth tip. The last tip that I'm just going to share as a bonus is to, when answering behavior based interview questions and any other questions, really, you will want to make sure that you are really understanding the question and you're answering the question. So, I'll tell you about a couple examples I've had before where I asked someone, tell me about a time when you worked proactively within a team. This is actually something that happened a couple months ago. This person responded with an example of where they worked remotely on an issue and needed no one. And so when I asked them follow-up questions about, who did you work with? They weren't able to provide anything because they didn't really understand the question that they were being asked, recognizing that they needed an example where they were working with other people. So that's just a quick tip to make sure that you're understanding the question. So, a couple of things I recommend to do with any question you have during an interview is to either write down the question that you're receiving. So, as the person's asking that question, you jot it down on a little notepad, or you just simply restate the question back to the interviewer and say, "This is what I heard you say," or "You're looking for me for an example where I worked proactively within a team, yada yada." That just helps ensures that you understand the question. If the interviewer needs to clarify something, that gives them that opportunity to do that. So if they're saying like, "No, that's not really what I was looking for," you're giving them that chance to clarify, and now you understand really what they're asking and you can give a better example. Okay, I've got one more. One more bonus. Um, Real quick before I go. Um, Last tip is to just make sure that you are not just quickly answering and not even thinking about a good example. Take a moment, you can always say, "Hey, that's a great question. Let me think about a good example to answer that." It's fine. I think people kinda get wrapped up into, "Oh my gosh, I gotta answer right away. I don't want any awkward silence." No, silence is way better. Like, 5 seconds of silence is nothing for you to just think of a good example versus you just diving right in and talking really fast about something that ultimately is not something that the interviewer can really use or doesn't put you in the best light. So those are my quick tips. I know there were a couple people to join. Thank you, welcome. Um, but real quick, I want to rush through these tips so I don't make this video or this live video too long. But number one was just to make sure when answering behavior based questions, you are remembering that you basically are telling a story. So provide some good details, try to err on the side of more details versus too little, and just be clear and concise as you're talking through the story. So talking about the situation, the actual actions you took, and what the overall outcome or result was. When I talk to people, they miss some part of that. Either they don't really talk well about the situation, so you don't really know what was happening, or they don't provide enough detail about what they actually did, or they just don't even talk about what happened in the end. So it's like you watch the movie Cinderella and then you don't know if the girl got the prince or not. So make sure that you're wrapping up your story very well and providing some good detail in there. Number two was to make sure that you are giving examples that are recent and relevant. Don't tell a story that's like happened way too far in the past that you don't even remember yourself. And then number three was to not rush. I've literally have had conversations where I'm talking to someone that's very technical and they're going HTML, XML, and then I did this, and then and it's like, slow down. I can't understand you. Can you talk at a slower pace? And I'm gonna pause for a second because I did get a question. How long is too long to think about your answer? That's a great question. I would say take a couple of seconds. Like literally, I'm just gonna demonstrate it. So tell me about a time when you work collaboratively within a team. That's a good question. Let me think about that. Okay, I have a good example. So literally, I counted. That was about 7 seconds. I did say something in between that. Oh, that's a great example. I would say probably no more than about 10 or 15 seconds. It's fine. Now, when it gets beyond that, that's when it gets a little like, okay, this is getting weird. But keep in mind, especially for phone interviews, so that first interview that you might have, and a lot of interviews are happening virtually anyway right now. Um, the other person is probably doing something anyway. So I'm not just like on the phone like this. I am taking notes as well. So you taking a moment to think of a good example might give me time to note something really quickly about your background or something I saw on your resume or something you said earlier. It's totally fine to take a couple seconds. Okay, that's very helpful. Good. I'm glad. Very glad to hear that. So I think I left off on number three. So don't rush or talk too quickly. Number four was just to remember to say I. This is your time to brag on yourself. You can say me, 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 me. I did this, I did that. Like, don't get caught up into the whole idea that you don't want to brag on yourself too much. When it comes to behavioral based questions, that's exactly what we're looking for. Now, if there's an example of where you worked with someone, you definitely want to demonstrate what you did to work with another team member, or if you're being asked maybe when another team member provided a really good idea or something like that, still answer the question, give credit where credit is due if someone else did something and you work with them, but you're still wanting to talk about I reached out to this person because I knew they had the knowledge in this area and I could work with them to accomplish this task quicker. So you're still, talking about this other person, but you're clearly saying, this is what I did. This is the action I took. This is the initiative I took. That's what the interviewer is going to be looking for. Um, the other thing and the last thing that I mainly wanted to point out was just to keep in mind and be ready for follow up questions. Don't just answer that question and go, that was a great response. I'm all set. That's all I got to think about. No, you need to be ready for follow up questions. So if that means you have notes in front of you or you have your resume in front of you, which I always recommend, something that you can kind of refer back to, definitely do that. But the main thing is to, if you're providing an example, make sure it's recent so that way it comes easier to you. So if I'm asking you further details, you can quickly recollect something versus going, oh, 10 years ago, what was I doing? Hmm. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. The last two tips I gave were just kind of follow up for any questions that you have as an interviewer. So making sure you're writing out a question and then or restating a question, whatever is helpful for you to make sure you're answering appropriately. So those are the main things I wanted to talk about in this video. I know there were a few people that joined, so I will give it a couple of minutes in case anyone had any other question. Primping Ain't Easy TV had a great question about just how long is too long to think about your answer. I would definitely say, no more than about 15 seconds. If you do need longer than that, tell your interviewer, just say, "Oh, that's a really challenging question. That's gonna need more time for me to think of a good example." I think the interviewer is there to help you. I mean, if you've ever interviewed someone, when you've had a really bad interviewer or someone that's really nervous, not only does the person that's nervous, they feel nervous and uncomfortable, but it makes the interviewer uncomfortable. People don't have like ulterior motives to like make you do bad during the interview. So remember, it's not a test. We're not trying to trick you. We're just trying to understand your experience and things that you've done in the past to properly assess whether you might be the best fit and the best match for our team or within the company. So just keep that in mind. Remember that you're bringing a lot of great skills with you. You're also interviewing the company. So just like you're selling yourself, that company is also going to be selling themselves on you. So be sure to be able to ask questions of them and things like that. It's not like a one-way street. So with that, I am going to go and keep this live short. Thank you so much for those that joined my live. And I'm just going to shout out everyone again, so you can check out their channels. So Cubston, who has been my moderator for my first live. So thank you, Cubston. Then Story Time with Shay Johns. Definitely check out their channel as well. And then Primping Ain't Easy TV. Definitely check out her channel. So thanks again. Thanks for joining. I hope everyone's having a great day. And I will catch you in the next live because I kind of like this setup. So look out for more of these type of videos. And if you like the videos, definitely give me a like below and subscribe. Bye, guys.